Sorry, bear with me just one second. I'm trying to pull it up.
Sorry, Jackie. I think maybe Sophia was
Due to
interested.
COVID-19, this
Yeah.
meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. Jackie, may we have roll call, please?
Yes, Member Burgess,
Here.
Member Braxton,
Here.
Member Franklin, Member Haskew,
Here.
Member Hudson,
Here.
Member Hirsch, Member Kamara,
Here.
Member Craig,
Here.
Member Levin, Member McCrary,
Here.
Member Meyer,
Here.
Member Thompson, Member Toth,
She's
Member-
here.
I'm here. I'm just driving. And when I get
Thank
to the
you.
office, I will switch to a desktop.
No worries, thank you so much. Member Xavier,
Here.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Here.
and Chair Mitchoff.
I'm here.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, we have all members present except for members Franklin, Hirsch, Levin, and Thompson.
Thank you.
Thank
But we
you.
do have a quorum.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone who wishes to comment on any item not on today's agenda, but within the purview of this committee. Doesn't look like we have anybody, Jackie.
I do not see any hands and I have not received any public comment.
All right, we will move on to item 3, which is our consent calendar. This is the summary of our actions from June 16th. Any corrections or additions? Any comments from the public? All right, doesn't appear so. May I have a motion, please?
Move consent, Hudson.
Second, Haskew.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Burgess?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Braxton?
Yes.
Member Franklin? Member Haskew?
Yes.
Member Hudson?
Yes.
Member Hirsch? Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Craig?
Yes.
Member Levin? Member McCrary?
Yes.
Member Meyer?
Yes.
Member Thompson? Member Toth? Member Toth, you there?
Yes, yes, I'm just having trouble navigating the mute and unmute.
Thank you. Member Xavier?
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer?
Yes.
Chair Mitchoff?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with members Franklin, Hirsch, Levin, and Thompson absent.
Thank you. We are now moving on to item 4A, part of our regular agenda. This is a discussion on the coordinating entity. We have a memo in our packet, and I would ask Mr. Cunningham to lead off, or did you want Mr. Hale to do that?
I can provide a quick introduction, and then Tim can jump in if he wants. I'm just going to give some very brief background in the event there are folks here in the meeting who aren't familiar with this particular initiative. The coordinating entity was included as a short-term initiative in the implementation section of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, which we will refer to as the ATSP in this meeting. And the rationale for that, I think Sophia is going to get into that in her first slide. So unless Tim has further introductory comments, I would have her take it away.
No further comments for me. Go take it away, Sophia.
All right, awesome. So can everyone see my screen? I just need to see like one head nod that you can see it.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
You know, it would help if I pressed share. Yes, but I'm Sophia Constantine. I'm an associate here with Nelson Nygaard. So let's get into talking about the coordinated entity. So just a reminder, like John said, the ATSP plan recommends creating a countywide coordinating entity responsible for countywide strategy implementation in order to address longstanding barriers to progress. So this presentation and then the memo that I'm actually presenting on, and which was included in the packet, documents the findings from our research, observations from individuals with experience in the field, and then comments from the ATS task force and working group. So what we're going to be talking about is how this CE should be structured. You know, what are the options? In selecting a structural option, the primary goal of the task force and the project team is to try to find the best fit for the unique needs of Contra Costa County. And an equally important goal is to try to avoid or anticipate potential problems. So let's start talking about structural considerations. There will have to be structural considerations with choosing a CE structure. The selected structure will need to partner with Contra Costa's existing transit agencies, transportation providers, the Transportation Authority, and be implemented in a way that mitigates challenges and barriers documented in the ATSP. All right, draft governance structure. And I do want to stress that this is a draft. It's a board of directors and an accompanying advisory committee. The board of directors could be comprised of representatives from public agencies, social service agencies, and other stakeholders. Funding, very fun to talk about. We love funding. There are several potential funding sources for a CE. These include Measure J, Measure X, Community Development Block Grants, FTA 5310, funding and grants from philanthropic foundations, private donations, TDA, state transit funds, and planned CPUC/SB 1376 funding. Like Alameda County's discretionary funding model, discretionary funding could be used to fill gaps in service. However, the CE will need to identify new funding sources. So let's talk reporting. We know that the task force members and your organizations have a lot of experience with reporting. So we're specifically addressing reporting for the CE. The CE will need to be in charge of reporting. This will ensure that the CE is positioned to administer and fulfill reporting requirements for various agencies and funders, and is positioned to offer a range of programs and services. The CE, or tracking and reporting, should be designed to meet the extensive requirements for Caltrans grants, FTA 5310 grants, and ADA paratransit, which I think we all know can be very tricky. So finally, before we start actually getting into structural options, we've included a draft approach to programs and services. This is an initial inventory of the CE scope and priorities, but this may change depending on the structure selected. The CE should approach implementation of programs through a staged 3-step approach. This will ensure that the CE is not jumping in to create new programs if they aren't needed or if they already exist. So the 3 steps are administer, which really is if the programs are already there, how can the CE assist those programs? The second step is facilitate, or the second stage is facilitate, I should say. If the program doesn't exist, is there an obvious organization that can handle that program? And finally, create. If there isn't an existing program or organization, the CE will need to design and implement that program. And then a draft, but certainly not final or exhaustive list of activities that the CE could and or should help or should prioritize include one call, one click, securing new funding, mobility as a service, travel training, means-based fare subsidy program, ADA paratransit support, and intercity trip program, volunteer driver and door-through-door programs, on-demand transit operations, ongoing community outreach and engagement, applying for CTSA status, integration of existing related activities into a new ATS framework, and then governmental liaison activities. So I'm going to pause real quick before we get into our 4 structural options and just see if Richard has any discussion.
Yeah, I'll facilitate this section of it. No, we thought before getting into the different structural options, we just wanted to see if anyone had any questions on the slide so far. This last slide is actually, as Sophia was going through it, it's a long list of potential responsibilities. So
it is, yeah.
It gives a sense of the weightiness of this. But are there any questions from anyone?
This is Debbie. Can I pop in?
Please.
Sure, go ahead.
So I apologize that I am not looking at this. I'm just listening, so I may have missed this. But as you were introducing the beginning potential different funding streams for the CE, that's inclusive of if it's a nonprofit. However, if it's not a nonprofit, some of those funding streams are not going to be available, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And I love the last list. That was pretty darn comprehensive. I appreciate that you start the 3 phases with the if it's already being provided, don't duplicate it. And I think the only thing that I did not hear in the list of things that the coordinated entity would do is to lift up new delivery modes in the case of identified need. Maybe you said that and I just missed it, but that would be the only thing that off the top of my head without reading the list, it sounds like might have been missing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
I
you.
think the third one that Sophia referred to would address that, Debbie, if I'm understanding you correctly.
You would have to, I'm not reading it, I'm driving, so you would have to tell me.
Sure. But I think that's what's intended with the third one of creating programs where none exist, including lifting up potential new programs such as you just described.
So it's in there. I just didn't hear it. Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. Thank you.
I have
Anyone
a
else?
hand up too, but I don't have a hand to stick up.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, the last draft approach to programs and services, the last bullet is governmental liaison activities. Can you give me an idea what you're looking for there?
John, I'm gonna ask you this question.
Yeah, the governmental liaison activities. Yeah, Dave, thanks for asking that question. That is,
Yeah, you know what that means, John. Why in the heck did you ask that question?
it is worded a bit ambiguously, as we bureaucrats can do sometimes. One role that the coordinating entity is going to do, and we put it in plain English, is be a place where people can go to advocate for improved policies. In turn, the coordinating entity can turn around and approach government agencies, elected officials, and pass along that commentary, those needs, et cetera, et cetera. That function doesn't purely exist for accessible transportation right now. So that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions before we move on?
You see Carol McCrary has her hand up.
Oh, okay, thank you, Carol.
Yes, I think somebody else does too.
Oh.
Lower hand. Okay. I was wondering where on this list is consolidating an application for different transit providers. We had talked a lot about that, and it was in the report in which there was one system of applying for assisted transportation. So I'm wondering if that's in here somewhere.
I think I can jump in on this.
Okay.
Nelson Nygaard can jump in where necessary. Carol, if I'm interpreting your question correctly, are you talking about, it's almost like a mobility management, but on the administration level to help consolidate, say, just for example, 5310 applications to coordinate all the various agencies, projects, programs, and roles? Is that?
No, I'm thinking about a consumer that wants to ride various different systems, and can there be one consolidated application process to get, let's say, I want to qualify for East County Paratransit, but maybe also a volunteer driver program for medical appointments or something.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I guess that is going to be addressed in a couple of different functions that are identified. And the first one really is the first bullet on the list, which is one call, one click. So that's the portal. So folks are going to be able to go one place. There's going to be one phone number, one website to go to enter into the system. And now that's just sort of the public facing portal. But yes, one of the goals is to have a consolidated, I guess, entry into the system so that we can repurpose information. Obviously, there's privacy needs that need to be addressed, relationships to be set up, that sort of thing. But that is one of the goals of the coordinating entity. And I think it is addressed in the ATSP somewhere. Maybe it just didn't get explicitly put on this list. It sounded like Richard might have had a.
Yeah, just to complement that. Yeah, I think it is actually good, Carol, that you're calling this out, because in our minds, it's built in, as John said, the one call, one click, but really that's the portal. That doesn't necessarily go all the way to address the issue that you're raising. But we are, so for example, the means-based fare subsidy program, when our goal would be to have something that is universal medium, if you will, for paying for those fares. But I do think it would be good for us to call it out, even if we think that it's going to be included in multiple bullets. I think that's a really good call. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And because we've got shared screen, I can't see.
Rashida.
Okay, go ahead, please.
That's okay. I was going to clarify what Carol meant.
Okay.
I was going to jump in and talk about the eligibility for the different services and streamlining that process.
All right. help everybody? Anybody other hands up? Okay, Sophia, I think you can continue.
Great. So let's start talking about structural options. And just for your awareness, we are going to, take a brief pause after each slide for discussion. So the first structural option that we looked at for the CE is a transit agency. A transit agency would meet one of the principal needs identified in the ATSP and from the working group. It can easily incorporate ADA paratransit trips into the broader accessible transportation system. Other strengths are that a transit agency as the CE could also access transit funding and could receive direct oversight from elected officials. However, there are some key obstacles with the transit agency, including a lack of capacity for a CE with existing transit agencies. Transit agency directors may not have experience with human service transportation. Each transit agency has specific obligations relative to their agency's specific activities that may not align with sort of the broader CE. And many transit agencies in Contra Costa County have separate regulatory and geographic obligations than a CE would. Just to give a couple of examples, 2 examples of transit agencies that function like CEs are Access Services in Los Angeles and Omnitrans in San Bernardino. So any questions?
Jeannie.
I have a comment. This is Jeannie Krieg from Tri-Delta Transit.
Yep.
Under strengths, you wrote direct oversight from elected officials. That's not necessarily so. For example, in a JPA, depending on how the bylaws are written, it's not required that all the board members be elected. It happens that most of the time they are, but there have been occasions in our past when the board members were not elected. They're just appointed by each of the members. So I don't know if that could be clarified a little.
Yeah, so we actually had considered a JPA as part of our structural options, and in speaking to the working group, it was something that there really wasn't desire for another JPA. So we've actually.
I agree with that. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure. To me, that's misleading because agencies don't necessarily have direct oversight from elected officials in all cases.
We'll tweak that to reflect that, yeah. It's a slight modification. Thank you.
Rashida, I thought I saw your hand up. Same comment or different?
No, I had a question about the weakness where it talks about do not currently have capacity. How was this researched? I mean, who was researched as an example? And how was this research, and who was researched as an example when it came to capacity? I mean, because I would think that you would have, nobody is set up like this. So when we think about capacity, you're either going to have to build it from the ground up. That's 100% non-capacity.
Yep.
Or you'll have an existing agency of some sort, whether it's a transit agency, nonprofit agency, no matter what the agency is. And we're looking at potentially 50%, maybe even 30% capacity, so to speak. So what do we mean by capacity? And who did we look at as examples of what will be included to make this all-inclusive capacity from existing situations? Or
I can jump in and try and address that. I contributed to that bullet point. And when we say capacity, it's not just operational capacity, but we're also talking about administrative capacity. And a lot of that comes from talking to Rick Ramasir over the years and hearing him testify at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority and participating in this effort. And he said time and time again, and there seemed to be an acknowledgement of this, that the transit operators are asked to do so many things in the current environment, commute service, serving priority development areas, night service, low income service, school service, just on and on and on. And then to add on accessible transportation and the expansion of that service that people expect and need. He said very convincingly that, the transit operators just don't have the capacity to expand in that manner. And that's, he threw that out in support of, an effort like this. So that's where some of that came from.
Okay, thank you. And I would agree with that about a good 60%. But I guess the question I have now is that COVID has really put the transit agencies on their ear, and it's made them flexible and nimble. So when we take a look at capacity, are we still looking at the transit agencies based on the restrictions? But because it's clear that they've been able to accomplish more things now than they did in the past. So are we looking at them now with the same types of restrictions and capacities? The reason why I'm saying that is because somewhere, I think maybe the last slide, we're going to talk about hybrid services, but the hybrid services don't necessarily incorporate transit agencies. The hybrid services incorporate more like a nonprofit or nonprofit plus 2 CTA as an organization. So it seems as if that there might be more opportunity for a hybrid type of structure. You don't have to comment on that, but I just wanted to get that thought out.
No, if I could, please, Chair Mitchoff, it's a great point that Rashida raises. Yes, the COVID has upended a lot of assumptions and operations that we're all used to. If we can go, we don't need to go back to it. One of the earlier slides that Sophia went over is that sort of phased approach to implementing services where, we want to be very efficient. And so we're not going to reinvent the wheel. And that's a dynamic situation. If the transit operators do have expanded capacity, then and you are able to provide a service with very little, ramp up time, effort, and money, then that's going to be a natural choice for us to collaborate with the transit providers. And so that's a good point, and I think we'll alter our, mindset and documentation as we move ahead with that in mind. Thank you for raising that.
Thank you. All of that is to say that this was very well put together. I do think that one of the things that I know that I'm concerned about is potentially having a couple of more transit agencies at the work tables or the project tables, so that some updated information, updated expansions, updated assumptions that might have been had may be clarified. We don't want this to take whatever it is that's decided to take forever to get off the ground. And so having the right people at the table with the experience, the structure, the know-how on every front, I think would be very helpful. Just a thought.
Agreed.
That's definitely something that we've been thinking about too.
Any other hands up, folks? Help me out, because the screen share only shows a few folks at a time.
I don't see any
You're
other
good.
hands.
Okay, Sophia, you want to go on to the next slide?
Yes. So the second structural option is a transportation authority. So like transit agencies, or like a transit agency, this option meets several needs identified in the ATSP. CCTA is the primary countywide forum for transportation planning. So housing the CE in CCTA would be a reasonable expansion of that role. Additionally, CCTA is an existing stable, respected countywide authority and presence, and they can access public funding. They can apply to be a CTSA, sort of as a neutral party, and they can provide direct oversight to the CE. However, transportation authority directors, again, may not have experience with accessible transportation, and CE has limited, or CCTA, not CE, CCTA has limited operations experience and authority. A good example of a transportation authority that functions like a CE is the Solano Transportation Authority. And if you want more information on these examples, they are pulled from our peer review memo that we presented a few meetings ago, but they are pulled from that. All right, any questions? Any comments?
Tim's got his hand up. Go ahead, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Tim Hale, the Executive Director of CCTA, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything on this slide. So I think in terms of the strengths and the weaknesses here, I think that, you know, the weaknesses of what's being described here, I think can be, you know, really addressed with, you know, the proper staffing, you know, at CCTA. And so if CCTA, you know, were to, you know, take on, you know, this role as the coordinating entity, I think that, you know, we would structure it in a way that has, you know, additional staff to be supporting, you know, this particular role. And so I think based on that, you know, we would essentially be looking and seeking for staff support that do have, you know, experience in this area in terms of dealing with human services and accessible transportation. And so I think there is, although it's a weakness, I think it's a current weakness, but it's not a weakness that couldn't be addressed with, you know, the proper staffing by CCTA. And that would, and quite honestly, that would be similar to, you know, the nonprofit, you know, the other, because I think the nonprofit, you would have to hire and pick the staff that does have the experience to be able to do accessible transportation and human services. So I feel like the weakness does also kind of go across the board in my mind, because I think no matter what coordinating entity you pick, there will be obviously staffing and training that you would have to do to meet the needs of what we're trying to achieve with any of these structures, to be honest with you. And then also obviously working with our existing partners that already exist today, you know, Choice in the Aging, Mobility Matters, et cetera. And I'm sorry if I missed some of you, but I think we would leverage the experience out there that exists today and work with all of those other entities to kind of help fill these weaknesses. If CCTA was then, you know, kind of selected as the coordinating entity. And I think the other aspect of this, I think, is really comes down to how you really structure, you know, the authority board as well. Particularly an advisory committee. I think if CCTA were going to take on this role, we would obviously be designated as a CTSA, and I think that CTSA would probably be a brand new advisory committee that would be obviously a mix of probably the same people that you would probably see on a nonprofit board in terms of, you know, advocates, transit operators, et cetera. So I think that would also be something that need to be further explored as part of this option. And I think also trying to figure out, you know, what the roles and responsibilities are, you know, relative to the authority board, relative to this new advisory committee, and obviously working with a lot of the existing partners that are providing these services today. And so I think, you know, I think I would say the weakness, I think, for this option, that I believe that the nonprofit does have some more flexibility is the ability, as mentioned by Ms. Toth early on in her question. I think CCTA does have some limitations in terms of funding, and I think that is probably one of the clear advantages of going with a nonprofit is the ability to be flexible in terms of getting additional private fund sources and potentially, you know, doing some sort of citizens-based initiative in the future. So I think those are some of the advantages, I think, of obviously a nonprofit, and then disadvantages of this model for the Transportation Authority. But I think there is definitely going to be some ramping up, if you will. And I think leveraging the existing resources of CCTA would also provide a much more streamlined approach to really getting something in place quicker rather than later. So that's something also to think about as well in terms of timing and schedule.
Joanna?
So I don't mean to put Tim on the hot spot, but I see
under weaknesses where it says transportation authority directors may not have experience with accessible transportation. I think they have the most experience out of anyone, short of maybe transit operators that provide ADA. But so I'm not really in agreement with that statement. The other thing is, and Tim, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Would you guys want it? You do 511 Contra Costa. I've been part of that. I've been around for ancient amount of time. CCTA's expensive, but you do a lot of consultants. So I don't know, maybe is that too hard to put you on the spot, Tim?
I would say that obviously that's a decision for the authority board, but I would say it's something that we'd be willing to explore and be interested to explore with all of you on as part of this task force.
Okay, any other questions? Rashida?
Dave Hudson had his hand up while he was waving, so I don't know if he wants to go before I go.
No,
or...
go ahead. I'm in a conversation. Keep going.
Oh, okay. So I know that we've just gone through like 2 or 3 and there's 4, but will there be an opportunity on this meeting to potentially talk about a 5th one? I don't know if it was considered or not, but
sure.
Potential.
I absolutely.
A whole nother reason why.
I mean, I'm not sure that we'll see. I mean,
Okay.
But we can always have a conversation, Rashida.
Okay. I'll let Sophia continue.
Okay, yeah. At the end of all 4 of them, yeah, we are happy to have that discussion.
But I believe there was one more question. I'm sorry, from Member Haskew.
Yep.
Thank you. Go ahead, Luella.
Okay, I just want to say that I don't know what Dave was going to say, but the fact that there are people from our board, the CCTA board, actively involved in this, it indicates to me there is a group of people that want this very badly, and we're willing to. Not speaking for the board, I'm speaking for me, and inferring that the other people who are here are really involved in this and want to see it happen in the best, most efficient way, and would be willing to put resources from CCTA toward the end goal.
Okay, thank you. Debbie Toth.
Debbie, I think you're muted.
That's weird. Sorry, guys. I have a whole new setup. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay. All right. If we're going to have a conversation comparing all of these different things at the end, I will reserve my comments. So we're going to go through all 4 and then discuss?
Yeah, because there's pros and cons to everything, and we want to come up with the best concept for the consultants to continue working on. So yes,
then I will hold my comments until the end. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, folks? Okay.
All right. So the third option is a nonprofit. Again, this option meets several needs identified in the ATSP. More options for funding are needed, and a nonprofit may be better positioned to attract new funding. And they can also access new funds that aren't available to public providers, such as philanthropic orgs, donations, etc. And they can consolidate different sources of funding. Other strengths of a nonprofit include the possibility of sponsoring a new simple majority sales tax initiative, more options for new and innovative partnerships outside of the transportation system, more flexibility than a transit agency or transportation authority, ability to structure the board deliberately for accessible transportation, and a new nonprofit could address the no sole authority issue in the county that was raised with the ATSP process. However, there are also weaknesses with a nonprofit option. Experience shows, or research that we have done shows that significant or tension can arise between nonprofit and public providers of accessible transportation, especially around ADA paratransit trips. A nonprofit may require training and resources to report on operations. They may have limited access to some public funding, and this effort could be duplicative. The board of a nonprofit CE could potentially just need to recreate the board membership of an existing nonprofit. There are several examples of nonprofits, including Access Services in LA, which, yes, fun fact, is a nonprofit, even though it is very, very deeply tied to LA Metro. FACT in San Diego, Move with StanCog, Ride On Transportation, Easy Lift Transportation, Paratransit Inc., and Outreach and Escort Inc. So we'll pause briefly for comment or questions before we go on to the fourth option, and then we can have sort of a longer discussion after that fourth option.
Susanna.
Thank you. Can you clarify a little bit the tension that is described as a key obstacle and what impact that would have on this program?
I could speak to that. Basically, just if we look at other situations, in particular the examples that we have on the right, there have been some pretty significant and in some cases quite dramatic tensions. So in between out, we have to be a little cautious here, but since it's already in the past, we can speak to it. Outreach, which was called just Outreach in the last years, in Santa Clara County and the transit agency VTA, there was a lot of tension between those, and it ended up with Outreach essentially being, now there's a half a dozen people, whereas it had been a $30 million nonprofit organization. In Sacramento, Paratransit Inc. was very, very well established and very comprehensive. They did all the paratransit, etc., for RTC. The transit agency took most of that service in-house, and so that's much reduced in scope. FACT in San Diego, there's turf issues. We've spoken to the people involved, and we've heard from both sides that there've been tensions there. I don't know if that answers your question, Susanna, but there are probably other examples as well. Easy Lift, I know, also had some issues.
I'm kind of also interested in understanding, are we talking about the tension around arguing around the delivery model? Like turf wars, like you're talking about.
Yeah, not necessarily. That was partially it, but to the extent to which, for example, in Santa Clara County, the transit agency, which was actually providing the funding, how much oversight, I think that was true in Sacramento as well, how much oversight did they actually have over these very strong nonprofit organizations that were very well-connected organizations? That's, I think, what part of the source of the tension was. The service delivery model didn't vary that much from one to the other, although in Outreach's case, they're an example of, they did an amazingly comprehensive job. They saw a need, they identified it, and they were able to meet it very creatively, very nimbly. But there were a lot of regulatory issues that had to be addressed and were not addressed. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Debbie, I'm going to let you go before Tim.
Okay, thank you. So I would say in the strengths category, you are missing that it would be mission driven. So this is an organization that would be built to serve these people and not a system, which our transportation transit providers are systems, and they are built in self-sustaining the system, not responding to needs. And I'm not judging, I'm just saying these are different models. And I think that's really one of the things that, beyond having the ability to access foundation and philanthropic funding, is that it's all that the entire purpose of this organization is to serve the riders and meet their needs. So I think that's a really important thing to note. I think regardless of whether or not this is at CCTA, a transit operator, or a nonprofit organization, there is going to be tension. I think all of these scenarios will invite tension. So I just think that it's important to call that out. And I want to know, and I may have asked this question, Richard, forgive me. I know that you talked about sort of literature review that you had done historically, and forgive me if it's fallen out of my brain, but have we looked at Oregon or Florida, for example, where they have comprehensive statewide systems that prioritize accessible transportation that is not the ADA per se, a much broader definition of what accessible transportation is and how it's met? Have we looked at if those entities are nonprofits or they're congestion management agencies or they're historic transit providers and how they do things? I mean, I think California is a pretty damn amazing state, but I don't think it's the only state. So just curious if we've looked at that. Thank you.
Yeah. Should I respond to that?
Go ahead, but I would like to interject that the only decision we're looking at for today is a model. And so once we make a decision on what kind of model, and even though we've got experiences with specific organizations, no organization has been selected yet. There'll still be work to be done by the consultant to come back with what the next process steps are. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, that's actually correct. Thank you very much, Chair Mitchoff. I think the idea here is we're presenting 4 basic models, and if there's a 5th model, that's fine. But I think we have a consultant that is we have consultants that are specialized in really looking at some of these different models. And I think what we'll hopefully find from this discussion is that 1 or 2 of these will kind of rise to the top, and we can hopefully get some sort of recommendation from the task force to really kind of focus our consultant efforts on those 1 or 2 options rather than 4 options, so we can be efficient, effective, and try to help move this along more quickly. So that's kind of hopefully what we're, and then as we kind of look at those 1 or 2 options, then we obviously, the devil's in the details. We would come, there'd be more discussion, more meetings, and more thought put into how we would further structure these different entities, depending on which ones we select.
Okay, and then we can also discuss how this group is going to continue to be engaged. Richard, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a quick response to Debbie's question. We certainly, we've done work in both those states that you mentioned. I've done work in Oregon, such a different setup in both those states to California. But you mentioning Oregon, Portland does have a very successful nonprofit.
My hometown, my birthplace. Thank you very much.
Portland's way ahead in many things, Chair Mitchell. And they really do have a great, which has, mind you, a good relationship with the transit agency as well. Or at least they did when I worked with them years ago. So, but we presented local California examples, because usually that's what, when we work with stakeholders, that's what they want to hear. But we certainly do have a national perspective as well.
Tim, did you have a further comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the weakness of the first bullet, and I just want to stress the importance of CCTA really making sure that this is successful. I mean, I know there's going to be tensions. There's a lot of stakeholders involved. There's a lot of people involved, but I know CCTA is very committed to really making sure that this is successful, no matter what model we actually pick. And it's very important to me. I know it's important to our board, and it's a continued rising need. And we all, obviously all of us have recognized the challenges that we need to overcome. And I just want to make sure I stress the commitment of myself, our staff, and CCTA to really make this successful, regardless of the tensions and the challenges that are going to be occurring in, potentially in the future or now. So This is really important to me and the board.
Okay. Any more hands? Okay, Sophia, take it away.
Excellent. So our last structural option to discuss right now, or to discuss today, is a hybrid option. So a nonprofit within a public agency. Rashida, earlier you had mentioned transit agencies. This could be a transit agency. You know, there are a couple of options of what that public agency could be. Again, like all the other options, this meets, you know, needs identified in the ATSP. A nonprofit is likely to be better positioned to attract new funding, but aligning with an existing public agency may provide more stability than an independent nonprofit. There are other strengths with this option as well, including oversight from a public agency like CCTA, you know, potentially less tension between a nonprofit and public agency, the ability to partner with private providers, the ability to create out-of-the-box partnerships, but still have the structure and oversight of an agency, the option to combine staff with nonprofit experience in accessible transportation beyond ADA paratransit, and transit agency staff. And this organization could potentially sponsor a simple majority sales tax initiative. It could be, you know, more flexible than a transit agency. And this could have a board structure specifically designed for accessible transportation needs. This option would also address the sort of no sole authority issue. However, it is challenging to create a new organization if the nonprofit has, or if the hybrid has a separate board. Governance may be convoluted between the agency and then this sort of nonprofit hybrid. And it may look like this effort is just creating, you know, another government agency. So a couple of examples of this are Access Services in Los Angeles, like I mentioned, and then Gomentum Station, which is a partnership between CCTA and AAA. All right. So Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you for discussion.
Well, actually, okay, can you take down your screen? I'm going to go to questions, and I see Rita has her hand up.
I have just one question. Is AC Transit at the table yet?
The question is if transit is at the table?
If AC
I think
Transit.
AC Transit.
Oh,
is at the
AC
table.
Transit. Well, again, we haven't decided on which entity. We're looking at a model now. And I think, John Cunningham, I'll look to you. Aren't they part of what I'll call an advisory group, or were they consulted, or did we talk to them?
Yes, AC Transit was on the previous iteration of this group during the development of the plan. Their staff was engaged. They do have a seat on this body. I don't believe they're here today. And staff, the consultant, and then Peter Engel and I had been in communication with their staff. So yes, AC Transit has been involved in this effort.
Thank you.
Okay, Tim, did you have a question or clarifying comments? Because before we go into discussion, I wanted to get through questions.
I actually had a comment on the last hybrid version, but I can wait until we're ready to have that discussion.
Yeah, let's do that. Debbie, you had your hand. I still see your hand up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify if maybe Rita was referencing the one seat trip was AC Transit in partnership on that, or were you asking about the whole plan, Rita? I'm sorry, I thought maybe that's what it was about and I could be wrong.
The whole accessible transportation idea. Because West County is still kind of left out, I think.
Okay, so I'm seeing John Cunningham raise or shake his head up and down. Okay, we've been presented with a lot of information. And I know, Sophia, you were turning to Richard. Were you going to facilitate the conversation, Richard, or did you want to add some additional information?
No, I think actually Chair Mitchell, if it makes sense for you to facilitate, unless you want me to, but I think you've been
Well, I
doing
may
it.
come to you. Okay, so Tim, you wanted to add something additional to the hybrid concept.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Chair Mintoff. On the hybrid alternative, we didn't spend much time there, but just maybe give everyone a little bit of a flavor of kind of what that might look like. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what we're doing with Momentum Station. So the way that is structured is that AAA is a nonprofit, and CCTA has a master agreement with AAA. And so AAA has a lot of autonomy in terms of what they're doing out there, in terms of the day-to-day operations, what they're doing with their private partners, how they're conducting their business. And essentially what CCTA does is we help provide, guidance and resources when it comes from the part of the public and the government kind of side of things. And so we also have performance metrics and reporting requirements. And so I would imagine in a hybrid model, which I think actually gives us the most flexibility, because especially as it relates to funding, that a nonprofit's going to have access to funding that that CCTA or a government agency would have access to, and vice versa. And so I think, as we all know, this is going to be very challenging to continue to fund and keep funding. And so I think having the most flexibility is probably a really good thing. And I think that the way that potentially might look like is that you would still have CCTA, you would still have a potential advisory committee, because I think CCTA would be designated as the CTSA, and then you would have this nonprofit board. And so I think what we would have to do is really, and I think Sophia mentioned this in terms of how it can be very convoluted, is we would have to really figure out, what are the roles and responsibilities would be between the nonprofit board, the advisory committee, and then the CCTA board. But I think doing it in a way, and this is something we have to flesh out in the details, is making sure that this nonprofit has the autonomy that they're able to do their work. Because without autonomy, I don't think a nonprofit can be successful. So I think there definitely would be, essentially goals and performance metrics, and obviously CCTA, as I mentioned in my previous comment, in terms of commitments to help work with the nonprofit to make it to be successful and support it in any way we can. And in that particular structure, and I think I've been talking about this with the board, is that CCTA would potentially hire a full-time dedicated person to accessible transportation as a mobility manager to help work directly with this nonprofit. That would also occur in the CCTA only model as well, obviously with additional staff beyond that. So, but I just want to, again, reinforce the commitment that this is going to take both government. This is truly, in my opinion, and again, I may not be 100% expert, but this is truly going to be a public-private partnership. And again, making sure that the nonprofit would have autonomy to do its work on a daily basis with some oversight of CCTA. And that oversight, I don't want it to sound like it's coming in terms of red tape. It's more there for support and helping with reporting and budgets. For example, in one of the weaknesses in the nonprofit slide was that potential reporting, like a nonprofit may have a weakness in terms of reporting out, government funding, like TFCA funds and accessible transportation funds and 50-10 funds. And so that's where CCTA could potentially support with reporting and requirements, and really, again, allowing this nonprofit to do what it needs to do, which is to provide services to people who have needs. And so I think that's what this public-private partnership would really look like in terms of a hybrid model.
Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of folks rushing, not Russian. Oh, Mr. Hudson, go ahead.
Well, I just want to help you out. Debbie and Rashida both have their hands up, but since I haven't chimed in, I'll do quickly. After listening to this and listening to a few people talk, I'm more and more convinced that what we're going to have to do is some kind of a hybrid model. It is going to have CCTA in it, and prominently We are the CMA for Contra Costa throughout the entire Bay Area. I mean, if you want money to flow out of the agencies that are getting state and federal money, you're going to have that name connected, or you're going to start slipping towards the bottom of the pile when it comes to going after it. Right now, we're looking at trying to get our piece out of what, $750 billion. But CCTA has already got the name and established. MTC, in my opinion, at least from everything I'm looking at, is looking for less agencies, not more. But I think that's what we're doing if we're bringing in the transit and collecting the entities that are trying to perform the needs. And I think that's the word Debbie used. So if you sit down and you do this and then figure out something that's acceptable to everyone in the decision-making process outside of the CCTA board, I think we're looking in the direction I think we need to go. I mean, I almost wish we could form our own district. I mentioned that, but that's, you know, that's for somebody that's 10 years old that can deal with it when they're 50. I think we need to focus on two alternatives to choose from: the CCTA and a hybrid of the CCTA. Because if we go down the road of 4, we're going to be back at this meeting at the next meeting. But if we can eliminate the agencies and the nonprofits as being the focal point of it, we actually are placing ourselves in a position to not only get more money, but more respectability as a pilot program if it works. And somebody said it takes a long time to set that up. We did a traffics program from nothing and had it going in the first year on a school bus program. I don't know if it's the same thing, but it sure seemed like it when we were doing the contracts, and had it going for some time now. So it can be done if we want to do it. And that's the overriding thing I've been hearing at these meetings, not the tension that's against, it's who's going to make the darn thing work. And to me, if we get the hybrid going where you could set up the same people that were supposedly having tension, we can get the thing going forward and we can go after money. That's my opinion.
Debbie?
Thank you. At the risk of sounding like I'm agreeing with him, I'll put some space in between.
You better be lightning proof, lady.
Heaven forbid Dave Hudson and I agree on anything. But if you would have asked me 15 years ago if I would have said CCTA could do something related to accessible transportation, it would be a very different answer than today. I do think that looking at all of the different options, the hybrid model is the best option. And I say that only because I'm placing a lot of faith in Tim Hale, who is a very different human than previous executive directors of CCTA. And I know at least Karen's got a few more months on this. There are some really committed human beings on the CCTA board that recognize and elevate the needs of seniors and people with disabilities that we didn't have before. We had a sprinkling before. I think we have a pretty strong force of that now. And I feel a different level of comfort in saying that CCTA can and should be a part of this. And I just, I want to note, I wouldn't call the position that you hire for it, Tim, a mobility manager, because it's an industry specific term. I think more you're looking for your CTSA director or whatever you want to, CTSA liaison or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to get into too many details, but the fact that you're recognizing that there needs to be a human who is committed to this work, somebody like Rashida who knows it, who's passionate, who gets the inner workings, who, you know, you would have to bring somebody in that's got that kind of level of expertise, because I don't think CCTA has it, especially with Peter. I don't know how much stuff is public, so Peter, sorry if I'm outing Peter, but I think he's retiring. So, but I definitely think in terms of all of the things that Tim said and all of the things that I said about nonprofits, and together that would be the most ideal situation for checks and balances and to uphold the strengths of both of those individual entities. So thank you.
I got old, Debbie.
Rashida?
Yeah, I just had a clarifying question. When we talked about the weakness and the strengths, one of the strengths regarding the nonprofit was the ability to get certain types of funding. Well, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there and services out there that are already getting funding and are already offering services which this program will not try to reinvent, right? So that means that we're not going to be spending a whole lot of effort reinventing the ability for them to get funding either, correct?
Correct.
Because they're already there. So the role that the coordinated entity will play in this is how do we fold those services and make sure that it's part of the buffet table for individuals who call in and just say you're being funneled to this particular type of service. Okay. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because when I mentioned a potential, first of all, let me just say that great work on putting these 4 models together. I think that they're great. I personally realized that a hybrid, let me just lay that down so that nobody gets confused off of this conversation. A hybrid type of CE would be best. I would say, also for the record that having 2 CTA, having some kind of oversight, involvement in this makes absolute sense. I'm not so sure because I wasn't part of the projects conversation, because I do feel as if it may not be part, and I hate that I didn't have that opportunity before this particular call, because it makes it feel as if that I'm going backwards, and that's not my intention for us to go backwards, but I feel that it's worthy enough to put to the table for consideration before completely moving forward. And if the decision on here is to move forward on 1 of 2 of the models with a potential third so that focus can be made, then yes, I would say a hybrid. But I think that at some point in time, the projects team or the workshop team should have a conversation where public agencies could potentially talk about some of the pros and cons that could work well with a hybrid. And when I say that, it's not to toss nonprofit out, ta-da, drum roll, but potentially a hybrid with those 3 agencies. Right, exactly. Did I blow everybody's mind? So I think that there's a little bit of discussion that might be required to see how that could potentially fit in. It is only my 2 cents. And that is because that in the past 2 years, I have experienced the collaboration of nonprofits, 2 CTA, health services, public transit agencies in the sweetest possible way. I do believe that there's a sweet spot to be found. I just don't think that all the cards may have been brought to the table to just give us 4. I think we're leaning towards the 1 out of the 4, but there might be a piece to incorporate it to just give it that sweet spot. And I'll just leave on that note.
Thank you. Dave, I'm going to talk for you.
Okay.
A lot of this is going to come down to the RFP. If this group's decision is to move forward with a hybrid model, we're not selecting anybody other than perhaps, CCTA, because they are the Transportation Authority. But as Rashida said, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 1. I think in putting the RFP together with the scope of work and the critical part, and I've been through this, as Diane had to leave because she has a friend who's having surgery and was coming home. So she's helping her. But Diane and I and the other board members, we've been dealing with some nonprofit issues, and this is no reflection on anyone in this meeting, because I'm not talking about them, but they have had some very difficult times executing. And so I'm going to want to see an RFP that has a strong experience component with not just we've done this or something like it. I'm going to want metrics and examples there, so that we get responses that will enable this body to make the best decisions, because that's what it's going to come down to, is those responses to the RFP for those nonprofit agencies, and selecting, you know, there may be two, one has one strength and the other has another strength, and we take them both. I don't know, it's going to have to see, but I agree with Rashida. We still want to keep an open mind on what this model looks like. And we haven't gotten there yet, other than if this group, and I'm hearing, seems to be moving toward a hybrid concept, but then there's still work to be done. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing that it's new, I didn't know that I was going to support this or not, but AB 617 changed a lot of things at the Air District. Still trying to figure out how air quality is working for disadvantaged communities. But they also did an outreach program. And I'd like you just to take a look at what the Air District is doing through AB 617, the North Richmond program, East and West Oakland, where the Air District is actually paying communities for a better environment, and some others to do outreach to people, let them know what's going on. And if that's also incorporated in this hybrid model, is it something that we're going to be for or against, or does it work? It's just something I hadn't seen before, and I wanted to bring it up, that the possibility is there that we may reach into that for this hybrid model if it ever gets accomplished.
Well, I don't mean to disagree with my esteemed colleague from the Air Board, but I'm not going to suggest that we follow anything that the Air Board is doing at this time.
No, we agree, Karen. I just wanted to bring it up because it exists.
I'm not following their model, folks. I agree when it's time for services and different things, but anyway, I am looking, I'm not seeing any other hands. So with that, is there someone who wants to move for direction to staff as to a model to pursue?
I move that we advance on the hybrid model, kind of measuring against if we were doing just the CCTA and incorporating CCTA in that final model that you're going to bring back to this group for its approval or disapproval.
Can I refine it that we're just
Sure.
going with a hybrid model, or your motion is regarding the hybrid model?
Yes.
Because I think we need to keep it open as to who that, and I don't, you know, yes, we probably do that, but I don't want them getting it and then the other. It's a collaboration of both groups as we move forward. Is that okay, Dave?
You do what you want. I'm good with it.
I second.
But Teresa doesn't like it.
Well, no, Teresa,
second.
your hand up, go ahead.
No, it's not that I don't like it. I thought that Rashida's comments about in the hybrid model where and I'm going to paraphrase, but the transit operators and, you know, others are still part of that study. So as we're wordsmithing this motion, I wanted to
Definitely
have that piece in there. And I agree with the hybrid model and appreciate everyone for the discussion getting us here. So
I think that's it. We want to make it real simple and straightforward to staff that this body wants to move forward with a hybrid model. You come back and I know I've been interviewed by a consultant, and I'm assuming others will be if they haven't already, should we decide to go with a hybrid. So all of your suggestions are going to be very much involved. So Hudson moved. Rashida, did you second? Did I hear?
No, I did. Xavier.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rita. Okay. Yeah. Moved by Hudson, seconded by Xavier to move forward with a hybrid model concept for the CE. Do we have any public comment, Jackie?
No, we have not received public comment on this.
All right.
We do have a question.
Yes, I see. Debbie raised her hand. Debbie, go ahead.
Can you clarify that the hybrid model that you're talking about is the one we looked at?
Yes. Definitely.
Okay.
Although Rashida brought this up earlier. I thought I heard her say that if in moving forward, that the hybrid can encompass a lot of different things. The one we're looking at but as we move forward and the consultant gets more information, they can come back if there's a need for an addition. Is that a fair statement, John Cunningham?
Yes, that's the direction that I heard.
All right. Rashida, you had your hand up and then you were just clarifying.
Yeah, I think John said that. So we're leaning towards a hybrid model with the intent that the hybrid model will be reevaluated, not as is brought with us, but will be reevaluated with the public agency component.
Correct. And the reason that staff has requested direction is they've been working long and hard with all of you. So now we're at a point, okay,
Yeah.
let's not continue to put all our efforts if in one basket, if the board is going to go in another basket or this body. So that is the purpose for this. Okay, we've moved by Hudson, seconded by Xavier, no public comment. Roll call vote, please.
Member Burgess? Member Braxton?
Yes.
Member Franklin? Member Haskew?
Yes.
Member Hudson?
Yes.
Member Hirsch? Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Craig? Member Levin? Member McCrary?
Yes.
Member Meyer?
Yes.
Member Thompson? Member Toth?
Yes.
Member Xavier?
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer?
Yes.
Chair Mitchoff?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously with members Burgess, Franklin, Hirsch, Craig, Levin, and Thompson absent.
Actually, member Craig is here and I think she was just having some problems with her.
He gave thumbs up.
Oh, apologies, member Craig. Thank you.
Okay, she's a +2. A yes. All right.
Screaming plus.
Thank you, everyone. We will now move on to 4B, which is an update on short-term implementation regarding the means-based fare subsidy pilot program, one seat ride pilot program, and one call, one click. Mr. Cunningham, are you giving this report?
I am going to provide an input on means-based fare and one call, one click, and I believe Richard will jump in between those to provide the means-based fare update, and I'll jump in to, to provide the other update. Sorry, it's escaping me right now. Where are we here? I'm sorry, one seat ride pilot is the update that Richard will provide. So with the means-based fare, just a bit of background for folks in this meeting who aren't familiar. The means-based fare subsidy is a strategy that was included as a short-term initiative in the accessible transportation strategic plan. This is responsive to the specific plan, strategic plan, which established fares as a barrier for some folks in our target demographic, seniors and disabled. Both categories are also typically low income. And so the update is, when the task force last met in June, we reported our work on this program, which was a pivot from West County to East County. And subsequent to that report, staff and the consultant team have met with Tri-Delta Transit again and worked on a cost analysis, which Tri-Delta Transit did provide some input on. And as just sort of a side note, this is the sort of collaboration that we envisioned in the ATSP and that we discussed a bit about today. And we very much appreciate Tri-Delta Transit's assistance with getting this initiative moving. And so as we move from planning for the means-based fare program to implementation, we need to address the various operational elements of the program, impacts on existing programs, how to handle client intake, and we are working on those. Right now. All that said, at our next meeting, we anticipate bringing an action item for review by this committee, and that meeting is on October 20th as a reminder. And then I think Richard can jump in on the one seat ride pilot.
Yeah, thanks, John. So since we met last time, David Kaufman's been doing the analysis on the one seat ride, and he actually secured some needed data from East Bay Paratransit, and they were quite responsive and cooperative around that. The team then had a meeting with East Bay Paratransit, and we are pleased to have Brendan Shelton there from MTC just to make sure, because the region has an interest in seeing this moving along. So we invited her to come to that. We're still pursuing the pilot in West County, but it has turned out to be more complex than originally anticipated. We want to make sure that as we look at any kind of expansion of the OSR service, the one-seat ride service, we need to do it in a cautionary way, just to make sure that we're staying within the available budget, keeping in mind that there is no permanent funding at this point. David's continuing to do analysis. He's meeting with Rashida, unless he's met with you already, Rashida. I think that's next week, possibly. And we should have a more detailed description of the scope of the pilot by the next meeting. Thank you.
And I can jump in on the one call, one click now.
Sure.
Again, some brief background for those not familiar with this. The one call, one click program is another recommendation from the ATSP. It's a program, and I spoke about this earlier. It's a program that would make it so that residents needing transportation assistance of this type can call one phone number, it's the one call, or visit one website to get connected to services. And so we've been doing some investigation into options, but this system really needs to follow the coordinating entity decision. Implementing this program is going to require significant decisions relative to software, contracting, and potential nonprofit collaboration. So we don't want to make those decisions for the coordinating entity. We don't want to get it stood up and have them obligated to something that they're not comfortable with. However, we are trying to get it teed up so that once that group does go, is established, once it goes live, that they have all the information they need necessary to move expeditiously ahead. So and that concludes my report on that.
Okay. And I think that brings us pretty much to the end of our agenda. If I'm looking at this correctly, we have no correspondence or communications. As John mentioned, we will be meeting again on October 20th at 2 p.m. I'm very sorry, folks. I will be in Hawaii, and that is swimming with the dolphins for my birthday. So Ms. Geringer, Mayor Geringer will be in charge.
Wait a minute, I might be over there too.
Yeah, I figured you might. I might coordinate with you. Rashida, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I tried to get my hand in earlier for the one seat piece.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Did we say specifically what was the problem in getting data for the West County individuals and how to start the pilot for the West County to fold them into an expansion?
No, we didn't.
Do we know what it is?
Not specifically, but David can speak to you about it when, because you're talking about something quite detailed. Now, he has actually told us what he was getting from them, what data he was getting from them, but I don't recall exactly what it was. But when you meet with him, he can share that with you.
Okay, and has WestCat been engaged in potentially getting that data? Because I believe that those individuals are picked up by East Bay Paratransit and would go either direction. They'll either go into Alameda County for the East Bay Paratransit portion side of it, but for the one seat portion side of it, they will connect with WestCat. So have we attempted to get that same data from WestCat, at least when it comes to ADA Paratransit one seat people?
I know that David has gotten data from WestCat for sure, and has spoken to Charlie. What specifically he was asking for, I don't know. But
okay.
He can tell you that as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Rashida. Before I adjourn, Rita, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to kind of answer Rashida. East Bay Paratransit, you have to be ADA qualified. Not just any senior can ride East Bay Paratransit. That's one of the problems.
Right, so there should be historical data on those that connect with WestCat for East Bay Paratransit because they're the only ones that they connect with for that, number one. Unless maybe Solano and they're connecting for that piece of it. But I guess on Monday, I'll try to figure out why it's difficult to get that type of data, because I don't think that it should be that difficult to get that data. And if the expansion goes beyond those that are ADA eligible, then I'm thinking that if we're talking about seniors or persons with disabilities outside of the ADA corridor, then the HES, the work that was done for this particular project that captured demographics, there's data in that project that tells us who the seniors might be that make up part of West County that might be able to participate in that. But that's just that might be more than what we need to put into this particular meeting. Okay, well, wait till Monday.
And Risha, before, if I'm hearing correctly, and maybe again making too many assumptions, that it's difficult to get information from East Bay Paratransit Coordinating Council.
No, that's what I wanted to respond to, Rashida. I wasn't saying it was hard to get the data from them. What's hard is actually trying to figure out a pilot that works. And that's going to be meaningful because of the different configurations. Some of the data is just not easily available, not necessarily from East Bay Paratransit. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Then I have a suggestion that I will talk to David about on Monday regarding a pilot that could work.
Okay. And I was just going to comment that I would think anyone getting federal and or state dollars has to have reports with data in it. So hopefully people can't hide behind not being a governmental entity. All right. With that, am I seeing any other hands? No. We'll have a rest of a good afternoon and August. Let's hope that the temperature goes down a little. That if those of you going on a break or vacation, enjoy your time, and we will be back and up and at it in September. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.